Hey guys, what's going on? So, Sunday market breakdown, and yeah, this is basically what I have on watch this week. It might seem like a little bit much, but you can see that I've got 5 on my top 6, 5 on my additionals, and then I've also got 5 on my extras, which usually tend to be anything outside of Forex. So, for the week ahead, I'm actually looking at it. If I just invert this for a second, we can see that there's the possibility of a few scenarios. We could still come up and do this, where we get something like that, which I'm not hugely for, but I know that this is possible, where price just continues to correct, makes its way up here, and then in this area we could potentially have a sell where you get this sort of inverse head and shoulders side to it. So that's one possibility. I wouldn't really want to force anything internally anyway, but more so I'm going to try keep it very intraday and look at it so much like this. So if I go into the 1 hour, it's a little bit more clear. And just remember, this is inverted. I'm going to be waiting for this to come in like that, and then maybe tap into this area and see if we can get a rejection for a short here anyway. So that's basically what I'm looking for in terms of the DXY. I am looking at longs primarily, as we can see from the weekly and the daily. We do have a strong rejection from this low, so with this consolidation here, it's highly probable that we will probably see more continuation to upside. For the low risk entry, you'd look at for any continuation above here, but as we know, with this accumulation, we're probably going to quite an impulsive phase. So once it starts to go, it will probably go with some momentum, and you may not see the continuation as soon as you look for it. And also with the news coming out in the following days ahead, I would also be quite mindful that it may be quite difficult to catch an entry, because we do have a few news reports coming out, so it does cause a bit of volatility. So just something to bear in mind when you are looking at the weeks ahead. We do have NFP as well just around the corner, which coincidentally is going to be on the Friday end of this upcoming week, so that's pretty good. S&P 500, so at the moment we are selling off, but it's not anything majorly significant. I think where the real sell-off would happen is if we had like huge sell-offs, but we can see that, you know, we had one sell candle and this one was a little bit more indecisive, and then we can see from a daily perspective that, you know, there is that element where this has been corrective. So if this is the level where we're creating a base, it could still move up higher from here, so it's quite a risky one to just be looking for shorts. But if we were going to look for a short, we would look for something with a little bit more weight, where we can see this as a larger flag. And if I zoom out, it's a little bit more clear. You can see it here in terms of a continuation where we're sitting through the low there, and then we're basically just looking for continuation in that area. So looking off the retest of this anyway, we've kind of pushed up, left a high, pushed down. If we start correctively coming down, create two bottoms, push back up for 1, 2, 3, and we tap into this area, it's really becoming more obvious that we could be looking for shorts, and that's kind of how I'm looking to play it. But I am very much aware that we can still pull up and go higher as well. JP225, I think this one's more of an aggressive play, because we're going for quite an aggressive two-touch. So if we can get some internal structure in here, then I would probably look to see if we get a push down insurance entry. I wouldn't be looking to risk entry in this area, because this can still develop into so many different things. So to avoid being caught up in, you know, that, and then it comes down and then does something like this, right? Which I'm not really saying that's the best scenario. It's just there's so many different things where it could do that, turn into an expanding, come into the low, and then even from there we could probably even reverse. So I'm not going to look to get caught up in something quite messy. I'd look for more for a refined position like this, where I can get in with a decent stop loss, and then even if I can get in pretty tight there, I can get a 7-1 to the low, and then at worst, you know, even if I was to get in, there's a 3-1 into that low there, where I could probably take a break even at worst. So that's basically how I'm going to look to play this. This is more of an aggressive one if that shapes up. Going into the top 6, I've got Euro USD, so very similar to how we're looking at the DXY, but what we can see here is on the higher time frame, you can see that we have a clear 1, 2, 3, and then we've actually responded from that area with momentum, which is nice. As we've began to consolidate, we are correctively pulling up higher. It's likely that we're probably going to be completing on this sort of corrective squeeze, where it does seem a little bit more extended and overstretched, but when you do really look at it on a much more granular perspective, there is a high probability now that we have that 1, 2, 3, and then if we get an internal 1, 2, 3 within it, and we tap into these areas and get rejection, we could probably be looking for pretty good shorts to the downside. So that is what I'm counting on, but on the odd case where we don't get that and it starts to sell off and it comes somewhere around about here and then starts to come up, I wouldn't really be too surprised off that scenario either, because then you'd have more of your parallel sort of corrective middle section here, and then you'd come up for the 1 2 3 there. It's just I'm not too married to this forecast. Just something that there's many variations of how this can form right now. It's just the main area of interest is that ray line, to see how we tap into it, how we respond. If we break up, push back in, we get a clear message from the market. JP225 is probably one of the most favorited one amongst CAD-Yen. I am looking for more continuation to the downside, so it's really a matter now if we can just get structure. I know that we're in a run of momentum, so it's not always likely that we're going to get the best structures in place, but personally, because of all the momentum that's coming, it's more for a reason why we would consolidate and move sideways a bit so we can accumulate some more volume to move to get the next move. So I am going to be looking for this to kind of just really create some clear, deliberate price action, and then depending on how we approach this, if this is the high, then I can be looking to either take a risk entry or an insurance entry. Either or, you'll be positioned really well for the higher time frame, because the next point of interest is pretty much this point here. Now I wouldn't be looking to exit the position, but yeah, I would be more aggressive with the position, because if I do take, for example, that insurance entry into that low, I'd be running 15 to 1, so I would naturally want to be more aggressive in those areas regardless. Next one is CAD-Yen, pretty much exact same scenario. You can see that we have more of a clearer low rather than a wick as we saw with Aussie Yen. What I do like about this is obviously it's through the low. If we can get something deliberate like this, I will be looking for the risk entry there. So I'll be waiting very patiently for this one to shape up as well. But I think these two are ones that I definitely want to be keeping an eye on, because structurally, higher time frame to lower time frame, we can see with that momentum from the daily on the weekly, it's not something that you want to just kind of now write off. Obviously when we were up here it was a little bit more risky, but now that we've had a clear follow through, it's more of an area that you want to be paying a lot more attention to. The next one I've got my eyes on is obviously New Zealand US dollar, sorry. With the weekly momentum pushing lower, it's very likely we're going to break through this and potentially start moving to this low, and then ultimately fill that gap down there. So with the DXY potentially moving a lot higher, I'm not too convinced with these areas being the point where we completely reverse and go higher. I think it's likely we're going to break through it, but the real question now is just how we do it. Because we've had a lot of momentum coming through now, it's likely we even get a pullback. It could be deeper, it could be larger, or we just create continuation and follow through, and that's what I'm kind of looking at right now, because I think when we break below these lows, it's likely we get a larger flag in those areas and we'd be a little bit more patient, or it just becomes a very momentum filled run and we just continuously start powering with the DXY going long. You start seeing things like New Zealand US dollar, Aussie US dollar, and so forth just really rallying, and then you look back on it and you're like, wow, I could have capitalized on a few of those positions and walked away with a decent amount of percent. So I wouldn't write them off completely just because there's a huge momentum there. It's more for a reason to just try to be even better. I am going to be looking for some structure within here. Obviously that's the retest, that's just that high there. If we can just kind of really read through this price, I think it might be more of a difficult one for most, but something like this would be very clear as day. You've got your bottoms, you've got your high there, you've got your 1 2 3 internal structure, you tap into it and then we sell, fair enough. Then you've got this where if we do get internal structure of a 1 2 3 and we come back into these areas and you get rejection here, you can still get positioned here and just put protection above and you'd still be good to go for the short. I think Aussie New Zealand likewise. This one's more of an aggressive, riskier play. The entry up here would be a lot better. This one I may even take off watch. I just want to kind of watch it for observational purposes, but I am looking at the long, because you can see with this momentum really pushing up higher, there's either two things. This is either gearing up for an evening star right now, right, because you can see how the weekly ended, so either that's gearing up for an evening star, which I don't think is the most likely. I think either we just get continuation and we move higher, but I definitely think Aussie New Zealand could be a gem. It just may require another week of patience before we really get involved, but looking at it from a daily perspective, you can see that we pushed up, clear deliberate continuation, failed to break lower, created a 1 2 3, and now we're pushing up. and then you look at it on the lower time frames, you can see that if something is developing in these areas, even if it becomes a little bit flatter, it would be better. Then we can pretty much get positioned in here to then go long. That's basically what I am looking at. I just want to kind of see how it develops. I'm not, like I said, this is not the best trade on the watch. This is probably my least favorite, but I've put it in the top 6 because I definitely think that there's huge potential in this one. It's just we need to wait for a little bit more data to see how it forms, and then we can take advantage of it. The only negative is you're trading on that area there, but the clear point of interest is this. So filling that gap is the main priority, and if we can get positioned in these areas with a deliberate enough structure, then we can get protection in. And then even if we respond from this area and sell off, you know, you'd walk away with a few percent at least, or if it continues, you're in for a great trade. Going into the additional pairs, as I mentioned with Aussie US dollar, this is one that I think is an absolute gem as well. I think with the fact that we're dropping off here, if we get clear deliberate price action, you know, this becomes like corrective middle section. You get a 1-2, and then this becomes your high, comes in, taps in with a 2 touch, but you had your middle section there, taps in over here, maybe even had a 1-2-3, whatever the case, could get positioned in really well. The odd case scenario is that this just becomes a little bit more complex and it just sells off. It's something that you just have to accept, especially with these pairs at the moment. You know, throughout this whole process here, you can see price was just aggressively selling off, and if we waited for clear continuation like this, we would have just not had anything. And that was pretty much the case throughout the week, where we were looking for some structures and we just couldn't get anything on the hourly time frame that was deliberate enough. I mean, you could argue there was a trade here, there was a trade here, there was a trade here from hindsight, but I think in the moment we would have wanted to see something a little bit more spacious and a lot more cleaner, you know, in the sense of it's pushed down, then it's done this, and then we could have really got positioned on something like that. But you know, sometimes you look at these runs and you just don't get that. So something to note and something to just be mindful of. We can see here with GU as well. GU's one where I think this could also be an underrated gem. So there is the trade here, which definitely is possible, where you take this low here and you basically just see it through like that, where it drops off and now creates that low, comes back up and taps into here, and then we sell, and then we come in here, maybe get another continuation. I just think there's just a bit too much risk on this particular one, so I'm going to wait for that follow through, push, continuation, and basically go with that. Swiss yen is another absolute gem. What I do like about Swiss yen is the fact that from a higher time frame perspective, we are moving to the downside, but we've overly extended dramatically. So if we are turning around, this could be one of those pairs that really aggressively sells off just to kind of move with everything else. But this one just really commits when it's ready to go. So I've kind of put it on there as an additional pair, just because if it does shape up and it's clear and deliberate enough, I wouldn't want to not take this position, because I know that if I get positioned in this area and it's all the way down here, and a lot of the other yen pairs are getting corrective, this one may just continue start to rally. So something to just bear in mind. Euro yen, likewise, I think because of where the yens are positioned, you're probably you know, a bit on and off with it. But I think the truth is, if you look at the rejection we have now, especially from the weekly, it's not something you want to just kind of say, let me wait a little bit longer. We are having follow through, we're breaking that low now. It's very deliberate. And then even if you look at that one daily candle, that's not really the point of rejection where it just completely pulls back higher. Like, yes, it's possible, but then at the same time you have to understand that the market needs time to correct and build more volume. A lot of people are trying to get positioned short on this, so it needs to test their patience as well. And I think this is a great way to do it, where we spend the next majority of the week creating this continuation, and then when we do get a completion of structure, you can get positioned for the next run. And I think that's really how you want to play it, because a lot of the time I've seen positions like this time and time again, and I think where people go wrong is they lack the patience. Now, arguably you can say sometimes you've stayed in a position and then it's just completely dropped off against you, and then you've taken a break even and you stayed in it for ages. Well, then again, you have to look at your data time and time again. Where were you positioned? What was the sequence? How high up in the run were you, etc.? And you know, these things do happen. You can do everything right as well, but I think sometimes you take a position like this, and let's just say you get positioned in it. When you look at a run like that, you know, where's your clear target? Well, what if you're actually playing this as the longer move? Eventually this runs, you know, call it about 2-3 weeks, it's down 14%, you know, and a lot of the time, a lot of people are struggling to make even 10% in a month. So just kind of consider that when you are taking this types of positions, because you know they can really move. And the nice thing about it is you'll probably be able to get into multiple entries along the way as well if you're strategic and precise and patient enough. So something to just bear in mind. But this is the trade that I am going to be looking at for the week. And then Aussie CAD I think is absolutely nice as well. So what we do have from the weekly as well is, you can see here with the follow through as well, we tapped into this little hook point here and we absolutely smashed through to the downside. I think that weekly retrace was the signal there in the market as well. Then we go into the daily and we can see here from the daily perspective that, you know, just like we saw with Aussie US dollar and New Zealand US dollar, that rally, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to have a larger pullback at this point. I think that's very unnecessary. I think if we're in a run of momentum, it makes sense now for it to consolidate, build up a bit of volume, like I said, catch the impatient people out, get them out of the market, and then when structure does fully develop and then either catches people out of the market and stuff, we can get positioned again, and then we can take that into the next low. Because as you can see from the data, we haven't quite filled that wick there as well, so it could be the obvious clue that this could be forming as the next continuation to get down there. Now if this just continues to sell off, it is what it is, and I will just wait and be even more patient. But at the end of the day, these are the things that build your consistency. It's when you know when to be in capital preservation mode, waiting for these, and then you know when to be in executional mode once these are completed. Going into the extras, I've got the Germany 40. So this is one of those ones where I think this is more closer to be on daily watch, pretty much around about market open. What we can see here is we do have this level of this expanding where we could potentially be moving back up into higher value areas, which also makes me think that the SPX could also be moving higher, but I'm not trying to correlate them both based on the DAX. What I can see here is we have a clear push up. This was your first sort of area of interest to go long, but it's not the cleanest. Then we have another push, and it looks like now we're looking at a more flatter, cleaner continuation to go long. We do want to see this develop so we can get a clear 1, 2, 3, you know, and then we basically get positioned in these areas to go long. I think this would be really nice for continuation. I think it just really depends how this forms, because this can still develop. If this goes higher and it goes lower, then maybe you get more of an expanding, which I don't think that's the likely scenario. But I think what could be likely is that this moves up high and then it drops, and then maybe you get something like that where this then becomes more of your bear flag continuation, and you see something more so like this where, you know, you get your continuation kind of form like that, and it's a little bit larger, but then it creates enough weight to actually get the push to the next point. And then when you measure it up from here to here, for example, you can take it, put it there, and you're like, okay, that makes a lot of sense now for it to continue to go higher. So that's just one other variation of what I'm looking at, but I've just kept the forecast very simple here and just kept it as a flat continuation to see if we can develop into something like that. It's a no-brainer. I will look to go long there regardless. US 100. So I was in between a lot of the SPX, the US 30 and the US 100, but in the end I decided to go with the US 100. There was a potential play on the US 30 which did at the time look quite nice, but I filtered out for the US 100 because this would be more structured and a little bit more deliberate in my opinion. So what I'm really looking at here is that we've broken this low here, and now I'm looking for a bit more of a larger continuation to then play the next move. If I measure from this leg to this leg, and then I take it from, let's just call it from the top of the structure, it will trade us straight back into there, which, you know, certainly aligns with where this high is aligned. So that's basically how I'm kind of looking to take this, waiting for a larger structure to develop here, something very clear and deliberate. And then once I have that in place, I can basically get positioned in this to go short. Risk entry, reduce insurance entry, one of those, more than happy with it. I'm not looking for anything less. I want to get in quite, you know, smart, tight, and strategic, and I think waiting for a 4-hour confirmation on this wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing either. I just think that we have to be more patient with this one again, because we need to see this fully develop, where if it does develop, probably a Thursday trade, Wednesday, Thursday at latest, but That's basically how I'm looking at it. Silver, I think, is an absolute gem. I prefer silver over gold, but I did filter them both in this week. So what we do have, which is quite nice if we look at it from a weekly perspective, is we broke all-time highs, we failed to create continuation to move higher, and now we just dropped off. What we can see here from the daily is we've cleared that low, and now we're pushing to the downside, and we're basically in the middle of the range from this point to this point. If we can get clear enough deliberate continuation visible on the 4 as well, this would be nice enough for us to trade into the next point low, which is over here, which would really give us a 10 to 1 if we can get about 20 pips in. Maybe we can get tighter, but then more so, I'd be waiting for something very deliberate where either it comes in here where we have that near miss to that point there, comes in, taps in 2 lows, comes on correctively, perhaps maybe an internal structure, taps in there, get a risk entry, and then we can go short, and then we probably get a pretty decent run to the downside, and that's what I'm really counting on for silver. Gold, likewise, I think gold has more of a run to go to the downside, but I think what is nice about this is we have that ray line low, and then we have that structure just above it. So if we look at this structure a little bit closer, in terms of continuation, we can see that, you know, we have that 1 2, if it comes down, creates a middle section and comes back up, we get that 1 2 3 clear and deliberate, taps into that little point of liquidity there, maybe even a little bit higher, pushes back in. You could even take a tighter risk entry within the insurance entry, or you could go total risk on this as well if everything is aligned with your trading plan, and then, you know, at most we'll fill that little gap there, more aggressive at these areas, and then if we start following through, which I'm really anticipating, you know, you've got quite a lot of room to play with, and then especially if this turns into quite a monster of a trade, you know, it can be all the way down here. So that's really the trade and the area I'm looking to play. Obviously, in terms of the move, you'd want to be a bit more patient with it, but sometimes when gold really does drop off in these runs and it's ready to go, you do get these really good moves. So definitely keep your eye sharp for that as well. Gold and silver, I think, are absolute gems, and last but not least is platinum. I think platinum actually might be my most profitable trade coming in to this week ahead, just because I'm looking at it and it just seems like it's got a lot going for it. So what we can see here is that obviously this is irrelevant, and obviously this is just there to show you that we near missed that low, but more so what is relevant is this. We've had a push down, a bit more larger of a corrective price, and then we've actually now committed and we've broken this low. As soon as we broke this low, we then created continuation, and now it looks like we might be creating another continuation to then move, where this is getting a bit more corrective, but it's still moving to the downside. So what's nice about it is sometimes when you get these runs, you get multiple entries on the way down as it's making its way, but it's just a bit slower. So you get correction, pushes down, get another correction, pushes down, and fulfills the move. What I'm really looking at here is a 2-touch. So I'm looking at that as kind of the little footprint there, or even this point here as well, but less this point, more so this point here. And I just want to see this basically come back up, tap into these areas, reject, get an entry in here, play it into these lows as a minimum, where I think I would have a 3 or 2 to 1, so roughly between, yeah, about a 3 to 1 into that low there, and then basically just kind of ride it through for the 8% and see how that goes. Obviously I might be out of the position anywhere around about the 3 to 6 area. I might be out somewhere around about here, but really and truly this is where the move is really taking us, so that's what I'm going to be more paying attention to. But I've marked it on as a 5 pip stop loss, or 50, or I don't really know what it would really be called, but I think you could even get in with a 3 depending on your spreads on this. I think mine's pretty tight, but depending on it I might just kind of write it off if the spreads are ridiculous, but I don't think they're anything like Palladium. I think they should be pretty decent, and yeah, I'll be looking to get entered in those areas there. If I miss it, I'll be looking for more of an AFT entry on the way down, or a scale-in to potentially play that. So that's basically how I'm looking at my watch list for the week ahead. I think the watch list is looking really nice as well. I think there is a lot to what's going on in the markets right now, but as I said, we are in that level of capital preservation, yet almost in executional mode, ready to execute, but waiting for these structures to develop. Because you can see, if you had these fully developed structures, it's a no-brainer. You would 100% want to be in executional mode, but you'd want to be well prepared for it. Now, I did do a lot of variational forecasting for a lot of these pairs, I mentioned it briefly in yesterday's video as well, but just to something to bear in mind is, if you don't get this, then you need to know when you're going to either write a pair off or you're going to wait for something else. And I think it's one of those clear times in the market where you don't want to be jumping on no average positions. You want to be preserving your capital for those really good positions, because those are the ones that are going to make you a lot of money, scale you up and move you forward. So just wanted to kind of bear that in mind. So guys, have a great week, and I'll catch you guys in